Hey, Dr. Lisa here. I use these lectures as a quick way to introduce you to topics that I know that students struggle with. So this week one, we're going to focus on what is intercultural communications. Intercultural communications are the building blocks to who we are as people, but yet many of us don't even realize that. So what is intercultural communication? Think of it as when people from different cultural backgrounds interact. Now, I know that your definition right now of culture may be fairly limited, but let's use this week to figure out what communication is, and next week we'll jump into how intercultural communication impacts that a little more. So some things I need you to know is that culture is learned. It's learned based on the group of people you surround yourself with. And it is also shared, which means that people from the same culture, subculture, oftentimes think, act, feel similarly. Your culture that you were raised in, and again, I know that culture, many of us are just thinking ethnicity, but it's so much broader than that. The culture that you were raised in creates perceptions, values, and feelings, and it also alters your behaviors. It alters your behaviors by really getting you to define how you communicate with people. You see, communication is really symbolic. So there's definitions for words, but most of us don't operate off of the denotative or dictionary definitions. Most of us, if we operate based on connotative or the shared meanings of what words means. And we need to communicate, and that's an important thing that we have to remember, is we communicate for an actual need. You see, the purpose of communication is to convey symbolic internal reality from one person to another. What does that mean? It means that I have something that I want to share with you. I want to teach you. I want to tell you. I want to inform you. I want to persuade you. And so we communicate in order to get our needs met, to get messages across. And communication is inevitable. So even if I never say a word, my nonverbal communication, and we'll study that more in future weeks, will also communicate. And not communicating sometimes is more powerful than communicating. Communication is irreversible and it's unrepeatable. So you know those people who try to tell the same story multiple times, and each time it gets less dramatic. It gets more dramatic, it gets more enhanced, and it's because we never get the same reaction because communication is unrepeatable. Now, there are three models of communication, and it's transactional, interactive, and one-way or linear communication. And each of these models has a space and a place for the communication to occur. So think of it this way, right? When we communicate, we have a sender, and this sender has a message that they want to send. And then there's a receiver, and the receiver is the one who is getting the message in. And the basic model of communication or linear communication is sender, message, I send the message, you receive it. It's much like this video. There's not a whole lot of interaction. But what I've tried to do in Perusall, I've tried to make it more of an interactive communication model. So what does that mean? With Perusall, you have to respond to 3 comments or 3 things that you heard in this lecture that you have a question on, or you want to tell a story about, or you connected with in one way or another. And so I'm sending a message and you're giving feedback. Now, that's transactional communication, but think about how we communicate on a day-to-day basis. I mean, think about how communication occurs with your friends. It's not like this video where I'm forcing you to respond back to me. Instead, what it is it's more a give and take, and that's transactional communication. But transactional communication takes into account so many different things, right? It takes into account the noise that impacts why we stop listening. And it also factors in the context or the environment. Now, a lot of this can be summed up in why do you stop listening in class? So, there are reasons while we're sitting in class why we kind of tune in and out. And it all has to do with one, our attention span, and two, our ability to actually block out noise. So, what is noise? Well, there's 4 types of noise, and they are the number one reasons why we stop listening in a class with our friends, with our family, etc. So, the first is physical noise. Have you ever sat in class next to someone who has one of those pens that goes click, click, and all of a sudden you're sitting there and you're trying to pay attention, but that's all you hear? That's physical noise. A person walking by, a scream outside. We also have psychological noise, and psychological noise is inside of our brain. And it happens when you're thinking about something. So homework you have to do, you have to go grocery shopping, you got into a fight last night with your boyfriend, girlfriend, significant other. Those are things that are inside of our brain that stop us from listening. And then we also have physiological noise. So physiological noise is I'm tired, I'm hungry, I stubbed my big toe on the way to class. It's kind of all of those things that are going on in our body. So we have physical noise, which is outside of the body, psychological noise, which is inside the mind, and physiological noise, which is inside the body. Now, the one that I haven't talked about yet is semantic noise. And semantic noise is language barriers. Now, wait, stop, time out, because you may be thinking, well, that's because English isn't my native language. So maybe Vietnamese is my native language, and Dr. Lisa's speaking to me in English. And that's one type of semantic noise. But culture is another way that we have semantic noise, because culture influences communication. And this is what we're going to focus on this semester, is how we miscommunicate based on the physical or social environment where communication occurs, the context, and the power struggle or emphasis that our culture or subculture plays on communication. I'm hoping this helped you understand the 3 communication models in the communication theory as we dive into how culture actually affects all of our communication.